Hello and welcome to another Hidden Depths video. This time we're talking about the Space Marine Predator. Now I'll be talking about vanilla Space Marines as usual because I don't really know the other codexes, so I'll stick to what I know. Okay, this is going to try and be quite a brief video, but there's quite a lot to get through, so the more advanced things will be later on in the video. Okay, so starting off, what is the Predator? Well, it's a heavy support choice, and it's a tank vehicle. It costs 60 points base, making it the cheapest one in the codex, and for that you get armor value 13 and a free autocannon on top. And it's a turret mounted autocannon, so it can fire in 360 degrees. What this gives you is 2 shots at strength 7, 48 inch range, and it's AP 4, which isn't terrible. It's a pretty nice weapon. It fills the gap between other things like the assault cannon and plasma guns. The main thing is its range. If you took it as a basic tank, keeping it cheap, then you'd probably want to keep it at the back or on the flanks, just giving supporting fire to other units. It really wouldn't help against much else, but at least with a strength 7 weapon it can pretty much affect any vehicle in the game or any monster. Okay, what most people do is look at the upgrades and they specialise a Predator, and this is what you want to be doing. When you take any kind of Predator tank, because of the options available, specialising is the way to go. So what do you need it for? Well, one build which is quite popular is the Dakka Pred. Basically this is good for anti-infantry. Well, in theory, I'll get to that. The idea is you load up on multiple firing guns, so you take the heavy bolter sponsons, the autocannon turret, and maybe you could add a storm bolter in there for an extra 10 points. If you took all that, it would cost you, let's just check, about 95 points. So 95 points, and you get 10 shots of various strengths and ranges. Now, there's the problem. The storm bolters can't fire as far as the autocannon, but you're still getting the armor value 13, and you're still getting the 10 shots at 24 inches of range, which means you'll outshoot a tactical squad, you'll outshoot a lot of other like bolter carrying units. So basically it's kind of like a tank version of a tactical squad. Best way, I would think, to run it forward alongside your other units that are going forward. Let them escort things like rhinos and such if you're pushing forward, and try and dominate the midfield with them. They're pretty good. You're always hitting on ballistic skill 4, so you just unleash the shots against the target, usually best in infantry, and hopefully something sticks. Now in practice it isn't quite as effective as you'd hope. Maybe it's just my bad rolling, but nothing's twin linked. You can't rapid fire with any. So basically you would need to support it to actually do some major damage. It feels like a little bit of a waste of the Predator's real capabilities, but again, it's quite a cheap setup. 95 points, it's cheaper than running a tactical squad or bolter equipped scouts, which are way more expensive and also less effective. So it gives you a few more options there, but as I said before, Predators really need to be specialised. It's unusual in the Space Marine Codex that you want something to be specialised, but Predators are the exception in this case. So I wouldn't really suggest running a Dakka Predator. I've tried it before and it just isn't effective. You might get more mileage out of it, but that's my 2 cents there. So other things you can do. There's something known as the Combi Predator. Basically this is the autocannon turret still, but instead of taking heavy bolter sponsons, you take las cannon sponsons. And this is pretty good. It changes the nature of the tank completely. Basically you're getting 4 shots of 48 inch range, 2 of which are las cannon shots, so strength 9 AP 2. Brilliant for killing monstrous creatures, high toughness targets, and popping like transports. The autocannon can complement this it generally can hurt things in the same way, although of course it's less effective than a las cannon. So, in addition, you can also take the extra storm bolter, but I wouldn't really advise it in this case, because you're going to be sitting back with this tank using the full amount of range. I'm not going to talk any more about that setup because it's more or less exactly the same, but a cheaper version as the full las cannon Predator, which is the one I've got in front of you right now. So this is a complete turret's a bit wonky at the moment, it doesn't really matter. Yes, this is a full las cannon Predator. The combi Predator, costs 120 points. This version costs 165 points. And what happens is you replace the autocannon with a twin-linked las cannon. Now, that means you're sacrificing a shot, but gaining a higher strength weapon, and also getting the fact that it's twin-linked, which means you're more or less going to hit each turn with at least a las cannon, even if you roll badly, and you'd have to roll really badly not to hit something with a las cannon, and that's pretty good. The Predator's a really good weapons platform for striking at range, and this is defines it roll. So what happens, what do you do with this? Well, generally you want to sit them back at the edge of your table and use them first turn to try and pop a rhino or a chimera or anything like that, a light armoured transport. Generally you'll always be in range. If not, well, you can still move with the Predator, which is always helpful, but I'll get to that later on. So you hit a transport, try and get that first blood, pop it open. It's a brilliant complement to a Thunderfire cannon. In fact, if you part them together, what you can do is fire at the transports with the Predator, empty the occupants out, and then unleash the Thunderfire cannon upon the infantry inside, and you can pretty much decimate entire units and transports on the very first turn of shooting, unless you're unlucky or unless there's other factors in play. But it's an extreme threat from your end of the table, and it's incredibly hard to avoid all of its shots. So a bit more about moving. Basically, it's the same rules as a normal tank. So you can move 6 and fire one weapon at full ballistic skill, which is quite nice. It's up to you whether you'd fire one of the las cannon sponsons at full ballistic skill and trust to the twin linked on the other thing, making it more or less ballistic skill 5, because you can still fire the other weapons as snapshots. Although personally I wouldn't take the risk unless I knew I had to hit it multiple times. If I had to hit a target multiple times, then I'd use the full ballistic skill weapon on the sponson, but otherwise stick to the twin linked version. It's very helpful. The other thing is you can still move 12 inches and still fire everything as snapshots, and again, having a twin linked las cannon turret means that you've got a higher chance of hitting something. It's actually a 52% chance of hitting something with a las cannon, even if you move at 12 inches. And that's pretty damn good. That means you have an effective range of 60 inches with this thing. The other thing you can do is, of course, move flat out for 18 inches. This is if you need to get somewhere very fast. You probably will never need to use this given the range of the weapons, although if you were running a Dakar Pred, then chances are you'll get a chance to use this. What else? Oh yeah, you can use its smoke launchers, which are very good for getting a 4-up cover save, which is really good for protecting it. You can use that after moving flat out, in case there's nothing worth shooting at or other things have fired first and already done the job. Then you can always move it into position, use smoke launchers and protect it until you get into a better position of cover. Now, I mentioned before about running it with a Thunderfire cannon. This is especially helpful if you place it behind the Thunderfire cannon but also nearby your Tech Marine, because then if the Thunderfire cannon does die, and to be honest it will be a priority target, the Tech Marine can still survive, and then he becomes a normal Tech Marine in all ways. So he has a servo harness and everything like that, and he can use his Blessing of the Omnissiah to repair vehicles. So if he's right next to the Predator, then suddenly the Predator has a lot more survivability. Excuse me a minute. Okay, sorry about that, the cats were going crazy. Okay, so yeah, if a Tech Marine is free after the Thunderfire Cannon's been destroyed, he can Stain A the Predator and repair it, which is pretty good. He can repair it on a 4-up, can repair a hull point, which is the most common thing, or a weapon destroyed or immobilized. It's just an extra bit of survivability. Also, the fact that most likely you are in cover. Obviously you want your Thunderfire Cannons in cover, so if you're in cover, it's probably bolstered by a Tech Marine's ability, so chances are you're in 3-up cover with your Predator. Now that means it's really, really hard to get rid of, and a brilliant complement to the Thunderfire Cannon. The most common form of the Predator dying is generally to glances on losing hull points. It's got 3 hull points, and I don't think I've ever had it blow up. I don't think I've ever had an immobilized result or a weapon destroyed, and I've run this in most of my games now. It usually just gets glanced when it dies, though to be honest most of the time it survives. I've had it lose a couple of hull points and survive the game. Otherwise people just don't shoot at it. There's other targets and it's generally free to go about its business, which means you now have 3 las cannons running around, pretty much free to do what they want. So what else we got? Okay, yeah, other benefits to this. Now this is going to be quite unusual. I'm probably the only person who thinks this, but if you're taking, well, if your opponent's taking a lot of aircraft, the new fly rules for example, then you've got a few options available to you as a Space Marine player. You have the Storm Talon, which is very expensive. It's 130 points, I believe. Basic, but if you want it to take down other flies with its Skyfire, you need to upgrade it heavily, and it gets expensive very quick. It's also incredibly fragile. It's as fragile as a land speeder, I believe. It's no better than a Rhino. What else? Yep, so it's really fragile. Basically it'll die quick because it's your main source of anti-air, and in games where you actually need anti-air, those are priority targets. Okay, so other things you can do is Skyfire objectives with mysterious objectives. This only applies to troops, but it's very helpful, for example, if you have a missile launcher, heavy weapon or whatever in your tactical squads. What else? Oh yeah, we have fortifications, which is the main source of any kind of Skyfire in the current game. So you can take an Aegis defense line, or like Imperial Bastion or something like that, and you have the Icarus las cannon, which is basically a las cannon with Skyfire, or you can take the quad gun, which is auto cannons with Skyfire, except the second one is twin linked, which helps in shooting. Now, as we know already, strength 7 isn't that good, so if you're hitting, which you probably will, the best you can generally get is to glance it to death if it's a heavy kind of flyer that you're shooting against, like Storm Raven or whatever. I think generally the las cannon is better at taking out flyers because the highest armor values up there are armor value 12, and of course it's strength 9 AP2, so when you do hit, chances are you're going to do something, which really helps. You want to take it down in one shot. Okay, now this is where the full las cannon Predator shows its usefulness, because as I mentioned before, the odds of you getting one las cannon shot off on this are 52%, so above average. That means for every 2 turns you're going to at least get one las cannon shot off, and the difference is you now have the potential of getting 3 las cannon shots off. Chances are incredibly slim, but they're there. So this means that more than an Icarus las cannon, you can do this, and also you can still use it against other things, and it can move and shoot, and if you're moving 12 inches, you fire snapshots. If you're shooting Skyfire, you fire snapshots. So you can move 12 inches and still shoot all your weapons at something in the air without worrying about any kind of adverse effect. You're already suffering for firing snapshots. So why wouldn't you move it for 12 inches? Obviously you shouldn't do this as a first priority. You should focus on shooting transports, supporting your other units in taking out monstrous creatures or other vehicles that are causing you problems. But if you are struggling and the flyers are overwhelming you, well, it's always worth shooting, because again there's that 52% chance, and then there's a much higher chance over autocannons and the like that you're actually going to do some damage. Now this is what I find interesting, is the fact that the general consensus amongst Space Marine players is that dreadnoughts, rifleman dreadnought setups are the best way of dealing with flyers, in that you get 4 autocannon shots again, twin linked. This is basically the same as a quad gun, except they still don't have Skyfire, and also they have less armour. So it's not brilliant, and also they cost a lot of money, and they can't move as fast. They can't move that 12 inches and then still shoot. So in general, you're actually getting a lot more bang for your buck by taking the Predator for this purpose. So if you need extra anti-air, consider a full las cannon Predator, or 3 of them. Personally, I'd run 1, because it's still a threat there. It depends. If my opponent really has a lot of flyers and I need to take them out, then I would consider running more, but generally 1 is enough. And that applies for the general role of the Predator as well. 1 tends to be enough. It's a great tank for performing its role on its own. You have other units for dealing with other things, such as melter guns and all that kind of thing, for taking out the really heavy stuff. If they fail in their task, well, you still have this to back it up. So what else we got? Let's talk about the other upgrades you can get. So there's the HK missile. That's 10 points, and it works the same as all the other ones. Strength 8 AP 1 shot, I believe. Unlimited range, I can't remember if that's been fact or not, but it's down long range. So what you do with this is basically it's a 1-shot weapon. If I take it, it's generally on other vehicles, so they can do something in support. It used to be that it was useful to have because it counted as another weapon destroyed result before the tank went. It can still be useful in that role, but as I said before, generally the Predator tank dies to glancing and not a weapon destroyed result. So, you know, it's not really worth spending that 10 points. Stormbolter I would only consider if you're taking the Dakar Predator. Again, that's 10 points itself. There's the Dozer Blade. This depends on how much terrain you usually play with. Have a good think about the games you've had in your local area. Is there a lot of terrain? If there is, consider taking the Dozer Blade. It will help because the Predator tank is surprisingly mobile. The other thing is extra armour. I really think this is pretty useless in 6th edition. It used to be okay, but now it costs far too much. It's 15 points, and generally you'll never get any benefit from it, as I say, because you tend to get glanced to death instead. Yeah, so generally keep it basic other than the sponsons you need. If you can't afford a full las cannon Predator, then the Combi Predator is a great substitute. 120 points gets you more or less the same equivalent. It's slightly less effective against transports, but generally it'll still do the job. So it depends how many points you've got spare. It's not really a downgrade as such. It's just if you want it to fill the role it's designed for, then the full las cannon Predator is always a superior option. The one last thing, well no, actually two last things. First thing is how to use the Predator in different ways to what most people do. I've already mentioned that you can use it as anti-air. You can use it as a fast moving weapons platform in the same way, moving 12 inches and still firing, and a good chance of hitting. You can also use it to tank shock, and this plays into its mobility, so if you were thinking of using it for this role, then the Dozer Blade is a good upgrade for 5 points. Tank shocking can help you. I've managed to use it in late game to tank shock a unit of orcs off an objective, which was very helpful. It actually helped me win the game, so I thought it was pretty much done, but no, then I remembered that it could tank shock and it worked well. So it's worth doing. It's slightly less effective doing it with the Predator than it is like a Rhino you have spare, but you know, needs must. It can be helpful for doing it on your backfield objectives, because chances are you'll have this tank in your backfield. I mean, don't just sit it still unless it's behind cover and it's got a good firing line. Feel free to move it around as need be, and make sure you always pivot, even if you're not moving. Pivot to face the front at the nearest threat. So that armor value 13 is always frontwards. What else? Oh yeah. So cover, as I just mentioned, is a lot better now for tanks. You only need 25% covering from an angle to get your cover save. Any kind of cover save is good, but generally ruins are good. You can stick it somewhere so it can fire through windows. All you need to do is obscure the front. If you obscure the whole front, then both sponsons can fire around something, and of course the turret can fire above it. Remember the sponsons, I'll show you on the model. Remember that the sponsons can move from the front all the way to the back. So you can generally, if you've got the back to an enemy, it's exactly the same as having the front to an enemy. You can still shoot across in the exact same angles, and this can be useful because you can park its back against a wall of some sort, park its back right against the wall, and still shoot around it and over it, and then that armor value 10 at the back is gone, which means things like bolters and things won't be able to glance it. It's completely covered, and your weakest part of the armor is armor value 11, and if you have cover save with that as well, then all the better. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's pretty basic tactics to use. You just sit back generally, keep it out of harm's way as best you can, but without compromising your firing lanes, because you need to be firing with this to get your money, well, points worth, and shoot the transports first. Once all the transports are gone, aim at other high priority targets if they're weak armor. Then just use it to support other assaults and things. Take out things like Terminators with it, it's really good for that. And of course you can always use it as Skyfire. So hopefully that helps, and I'll be back with more videos soon.